to all those who celebrate. I'm Diana Morley, and this is my paper, Death and Atonement in King Lear. Shakespeare's King Lear takes place in a time before Christianity was established. The story follows an old, addled king coming to terms with the fact that death is imminent. Religious people may often use their faith to find comfort in such a situation. The idea of an afterlife and the question of whether one exists proves to be a theme in the verses of King Lear, despite it being set before such Christian concepts originated. Without religious assurance in an afterlife, the characters of King Lear succumb to a consuming fear that their legacies may become erased by their mortality. Shakespeare's exclusion of Christianity from the play emphasizes the nihilistic ideals that replace any meaning that religion provides in life. For several of the different characters like Goneril, Edmund, and especially Lear himself, that nihilism charts the lack of a notion of an afterlife after death. In turn, the finality of dying proves itself to be a motivating factor in the characters' decision whether to atone for the things they have done wrong and how to successfully do so. Lear's spiral downward over the course of the play stems from his declining faculties, making it impossible to ignore his own mortality without clarity about what will outlast him. From his entrance in the play, Lear is pressed to take measures to secure his affairs of state. Lear acts out in an attempt to gain control over that which humankind and all animals alike have the least control over, death. His need to oversee the division of lands and pay witness to the events that would typically succeed the death of the king establishes for the audience the fact that Lear is teetering in his sanity, as it displays a discrepancy between Lear and his understanding of the natural order of things. Standard practice is overridden in a show of his overinflated sense of power. Lear then pits his daughters against each other and insists they compete in vocalizations of love for him. He carries out this manipulative tactic to narcissistically soothe his fear of death and to ensure that his daughters will most directly continue his legacy and preserve his rule to his liking. This action, followed by the banishment of his only truly loving daughter, Cordelia, is the significant wrongdoing that demonstrates his misguided state of mind to the audience and prompts the viewers towards Lear's journey towards atonement. As Lear approaches death, he brings a fundamental facet of his life to a forcible close by passing on his title of ruler to his daughters and their husbands, with the exception of Cordelia. In doing so, a part of Lear dies. Though it's Lear's decision to give up his throne prior to his death, he shows immediate regret. He surrounds himself in leisure with a makeshift militia of 100 rough knights to maintain the power that he sacrificed. In an interaction following Lear's abdication from power, he asks Oswald, Goneril's servant, "Who am I, sir?" Lear's goal in asking is to hear that he is still viewed with the same reverence as he was when he was still king, but Oswald responds that Lear is my lady's father. Lear responds to what he understands to be Oswald's disrespect with anger, calling him a list of names. He is forced to come face to face with the fact that he already knew but wanted to ignore. That to give up being king means to give up his power. Later in that same scene, Lear again asks, "Who is it that can tell me who I am?" And the fool responds eerily, "Lear's shadow." The death of Lear's position as king becomes representative of Lear's actual death, and he spirals further into mimicking an afterlife with the knights by conjuring a shadow monarchy of loyalist troops which provide him with a mobilized force to protect his every deranged whim after his reign has come to a close. A turning point in the plot comes after Lear reconciles with Cordelia and accepts the fact that he is dying. Upon their reunion, Lear says, "You do me wrong to take me out of the grave. Thou art a soul in bliss, but I am bound upon a wheel of fire that mine own tears do scald like molten lead." In this one instance, the Christianity of Shakespeare's time peeks through. Shakespeare, posing Cordelia as an angel and Lear as damned and suffering his eternal punishment, suggests it was originally written for an audience with Christian values. According to a Christian understanding of heaven and hell, Lear's action would result in his damnation and Cordelia's in her salvation. From there, the audience follows as Cordelia offers her forgiveness to Lear and is brought to question if this forgiveness is enough for Lear's salvation. In an article written by George Hoffman titled "Montaigne, Lear, and the Question of Afterlife," Hoffman explains that salvation is not the end goal of forgiveness in the minds of the characters of King Lear. Following Cordelia's death, Lear remarks the possible movement of her lips, and Hoffman explains that in expressing this hope through a dying madman's words, however, Shakespeare invites his audience to consider rather the fact that we see nothing, and thus to reflect upon the void that separates Christian promises of salvation from the play's depiction of a bleak, inhospitable universe. Shakespeare explained this exact concept earlier in the play in the famous line, "As flies to wanton boys we are to the gods. They kill us for sport." The message of the play illuminates when considering these two quotes next to each other. The central dilemma of King Lear is to reconcile the impact of one's life and the potential that it could be meaningless. Once Lear accepts he is dying, he is pushed to repair the harm he has caused his youngest daughter. His nihilistic shield of thinking drops, and he accepts that life's meaning can exist within our relationships, and so seeks to die with the most important of his connections intact. Though Cordelia has already forgiven him, before they are brought to prison, Lear says, "No, no, no, no. Come, let's away to prison. We two alone will sing like birds in the cage. When thou dost ask me blessing, I'll kneel down and ask thee of forgiveness." He accepts this punishment and resolves to relish in his time with his loving daughter. He paints a picture of a good and happy life together despite their imprisonment. This backwards thinking shows the deep confusion the old man has sunken into. Lear understands the harm he has caused Cordelia, and though his mind is lost, he clings onto her forgiveness. This concept of atonement is revisited in the plot threads of other characters in the play. Lear is far from the only character who must atone for grievances. Several of the characters throughout the play harm others and either put the effort into making reparations or not at all. Goneril and Regan, the other two daughters of Lear, are the main villains of the story. By the end of the story, not only have they shattered all of their relationships, they have turned against each other. After seeing Edmund injured and Albany reveal that her conspiracy against him is known, Goneril rushes off and dies by suicide, but not before confessing to her sister's murder. A messenger explains, and her sister by her is poisoned. She confesses it. Goneril's actions throughout the play do not suggest that she would confess in the spirit of repentance. The more likely of possibilities is that Goneril took pride in the accomplishment of poisoning her sister, preferred death to making any form of reparations, and professed to it before ending her life. Goneril's actions are the exact inverse of Lear's need to atone. She finds the absence of an afterlife enough excuse to act in her worst, without regard to punishment or retribution. For Goneril, her parting act is a nihilistic punctuation on her self-serving existence. In the parallel stories of Gloucester, Lear, and their children, Edmund and Goneril serve as literary foils for each other. Both carry a rivalry with siblings over their notion of entitlement, though Edmund proves himself to be incrementally less remorseless. While Goneril and Regan's motivation for their cruelty is entirely self-serving, Edmund's nihilism is based in vengeance for the mistreatment he endured as an illegitimate son of the king's advisor. Seeing malice rooted in trauma puts into perspective the genuine sociopathy of Goneril's extreme and power-hungry actions. Edmund, unlike Goneril, does make an effort to fix the things he's done wrong. After his fight with Edgar on his deathbed, Edmund says, "I pant for life, some good I mean to do. Despite of mine own nature, quickly send, be brief in it, to the castle, for my writ is on the life of Lear and Cordelia." His attempt at making reparations shows his ability to feel remorse for his actions. In nearing death, Edmund suddenly finds a meaning he can apply to life, making goodness worth it. As we follow Lear's journey to atonement, the subplots of Edmund and Goneril show the audience other pathways and options in narrative arcs of reconciliation for past actions and misdeeds. Lear arrives at Cordelia's forgiveness and then quickly dies after. Though distraught over Cordelia's death, he has reached two resolutions that the audience has witnessed him struggle towards. His crawl to death was not unburdened as he had originally stated he would have liked, but in his demand for the love test, he was ensuring himself a punishing end of life. By Shakespeare bringing up Lear's death so early in the play, he establishes a fait accompli that the play will follow him into his last moments. Although the audience is provided some sense of satisfaction and hope when Cordelia sets aside the cruelty she has endured to react with concern for her father's well-being, it is fairly expected that both their fates will result in a tragic end. Despite this, Lear's journey to atonement, at least in the eyes of Cordelia, ends successfully. In Edmund and Goneril's cases, the success that Lear experiences is not duplicated. Edmund is too late to halt the execution of Lear and Cordelia, though his intentions were aligned correctly. Goneril backs even further away from any semblance of atonement by ending her life with a prideful proclamation of her wrongdoing. The story of King Lear is one of existential crises that speaks to a deeper tendency in humans to act out in response to the perceived meaninglessness of life. Shakespeare's message, though through having only one character's goal of atonement be achieved successfully, if even hardly so, is a powerful one. To achieve atonement for one's misdeeds, a full journey is required. Although Lear makes imperfect amends for his impulsive actions regretfully done in a panicked state of instability, the other characters consciously calculate and orchestrate their ill will nearly up to the end. Reparations cannot be fully made in one moment's reflection and decision to attempt to repair the final outcome of a series of destructive choices, as Edmund tries to do. Moreover, atonement is certainly not the pronouncement before death that Goneril makes. For Lear, the play follows his journey to a redemption of sorts when he accepts his imminent death and turns to correct his fearful misdeeds. The time he spends coming to terms with mortality allows him to bring meaning into the atonement of his final moments. Without an ensured afterlife to punish or reward him or to meet Cordelia in, he elects to make amends in the relationship that gives his life the most meaning before arriving at his death. Thank you.